Hi again. So, as we have seen in the USB connector circuit diagram, we have seen that always we find near to the USB connector an IC that convert 5 volt to 5 volt VCC or USB VCC, a special voltage for the USB connector. We find also a chemical capacitor that filter the 5 volt in order to get a DC voltage. We find also some coils and we can find a fuse resistor, etc. Okay, so as you can see here, we have here two USB ports, as you can see. Okay, we have two USB ports. So as you can see here, we have the same component as we see in the circuit diagram. For this USB, as we see, we have a chemical capacitor, okay, that filter the 5 volt. We have the IC here. We have a fuse, a resistor, a fuse resistor, as you can see. Okay, we have a chemical capacitor. This is just or a ceramic capacitor. This is for protection. And we have here coil. As you can see here, we have L. L to T means a coil. The same thing for this USB connector. We have here an IC U14. We have chemical capacitor for this is a filtering capacitor. We have here two capacitors, and we have a fuse resistor, and we have an inductor. Okay, so this is the USB connector circuit. Okay, if you have a problem in one of these USB, you should check all these components. But first, you can check the fuse using the multimeter. We will check all these components using the multimeter. And of course, in the other side, as you can see, in the other side, we have, as you can see, 4 pins, as you can see. Of course, this is for ground. These two are for ground. And here we have 4 pins. As you can see here, we have here 1. As you can see, means this is the pin number 1. Means here we have 5 volt. We should get 5 volt. And D minus, D plus, and here connected to the ground. Okay, we will check all this using the multimeter. The same for this also. The same for this connection also. We have 5 volt, D minus, D plus, and ground. We'll check all this using the multimeter, but first let's check other motherboard in order to go deeper into understanding the USB component circuit. So as you can see here, for this motherboard also, as you can see here, we have two USB ports, as you can see. And for this motherboard, we have an IC here, as you can see. This is the IC. We have U28. We have the chemical capacitor, and we have here a capacitor, a ceramic capacitor. Okay, in the other side, let's check the other side. So in the other side, we have just the terminals here. Okay, as you can see. So for this motherboard, it seems that these two connectors have just one IC and one chemical capacitor that gives to these connectors 5 volt. Okay, but for the previous motherboard, we have seen that for every connector, it has one IC, chemical capacitor, inductor, and other components. But for this motherboard, just one IC is responsible to give 5 volt to these two capacitors. Okay, so let's check another motherboard. So here, as you can see, we have another motherboard over here. This is the USB connector, as you can see here. Here we have the 4 pins, as you see. This mark, this triangle, means this is pin number 1. And pin number 2, 3, and 4. Pin number 1 is connected to 5 volt. As you can see here, we have this path. The 5 volt is connected directly to the plus of the chemical capacitor. as you see. Okay, so here we have D minus, D plus, and we have the ground here. We will check all these using the multimeter. So as you can see here, we have the chemical capacitor, we have L7, so this is the inductors, two inductors. These two inductors is connected to these two center pins, I mean data minus and data plus, exactly as we saw in the schematic. And here we have, this is a diode and this is the chemical capacitor, but let's look for the IC in the other side. So as you can see, we have here the USB connector. This is the IC U13. Okay, this is the IC that is responsible for this USB connector. Okay, let's check another motherboard. So for this motherboard, as you can see, we have the USB connector. We have here the chemical capacitor. As you can see here, we have the chemical capacitor. But here we don't have anything. Let's see the other side. So as you can see, this is the USB connector. So here, as you can see, we have the IC. Yeah, this is the IC U16. And this is the resistor near to this. This is a network resistor. Okay, and here, as you can see, okay, as you can see, this is for data. Okay, as you see, we have here this bus. This is a tin bus, because the data is always about 1.2 volt to 3.3 volt. And of course, here we have the other pin. So we have here the 5 volt, and here we have the ground. We will check all this. So remember with me the schematic. Okay, we have here the USB connector. Okay, so the USB connector is the pin number 1 is connected to the chemical capacitor, the plus of chemical capacitor. Okay, and to ceramic capacitor. Okay, and here of course the chemical capacitor is connected to the V out of the IC that is responsible of generating USB VCCA. Okay, so for us, we will check in the motherboard whether the chemical capacitor is connected to pin number 1. We will check also these two inductors, as you can see here, and we will check also the IC. Please remember the schematic. Okay, remember the schematic. Pin number 1 is connected to the chemical capacitor and to the V out of the IC. Pin number 2 is connected to one inductor. Pin number 3 also connected to other inductor, and pin number 4 also connected to the ground. Okay, now let's go to the motherboard and use the multimeter to check all components.